It's the real news. I'm Denier. Environmental Protection Agency Chief Scott Pruitt resigned on Thursday amidst numerous allegations of ethical and legal violations. Trump announced Pruitt's resignation via Twitter, where he also said that EPA Deputy Administrator and former coal lobbyist Andrew Wheeler will assume the role of acting administrator this Monday. Just hours before Pruitt resigned, two congressmen called upon the EPA's Inspector General to investigate allegations that Pruitt has been hiding and falsifying calendar records of his meetings with industry officials. And these came in a slew of new allegations reported by the Washington Post on Monday. Aides also said that the administrator asked EPA staffers to help his wife get a six-figure job and to perform many other non-official tasks. Here to talk about all of this is Marianne Hitt. She's the director of the Beyond Coal campaign at the Sierra Club. Thanks for joining us today.
Much for having me.
So first, let's talk a little bit about what we're losing in Scott Pruitt. Let's assess his record a little bit. So as you know, and many of you probably know, on Monday, a school teacher named Kristen Mink actually confronted Pruitt in a D.C. restaurant and asked him to resign. Let's see that clip.
I just wanted to urge you to resign because of what you're doing to the environment in our country. This is my son. He loves animals. He loves clean air. He loves clean water. Meanwhile, you're slashing strong fuel standards for cars and trucks for the benefits of big corporations. We deserve to have somebody at the EPA who actually does protect our environment, somebody who believes in climate change and takes it seriously for the benefit of all of us, including our children. So I would urge you to resign before your scandals push you out.
So Mink castigated Pruitt for being a climate denier, for attacking clean air and water standards, for renting a condo from the spouse of a prominent fossil fuel lobbyist with whom he was in talks. This was just as a reminder at the time that he actually approved the Alberta Clipper pipeline, allowing hundreds of thousands more barrels of oil per day to flow from the United States to the United States from Canada's tar sands. Talk a little bit about his record generally and what Pruitt's environmental impact was and about his deregulatory agenda.
Well, let me say first that I am a mom of an 8-year-old, and I found it very heartwarming when that mom stood up and I think said what a lot of us moms wish we could say to Scott Pruitt in person, which is that it's our clean air and our clean water and the very safety of our kids that is on the line. And Scott Pruitt, from day one in office, was frankly working to dismantle the EPA. It was his life's work, formerly as the Oklahoma Attorney General, to try to find shortcuts and loopholes around our clean air and clean water standards. And from his first day on the job, he began working at the behest of polluters to do just that. And in doing so, if that wasn't bad enough, he also it was just frankly a bottomless pit of scandals, of corruption, from, multi-$100 fountain pens to accepting cheap rent from a lobbyist for a fossil fuel company, to, tactical pants that were bought for him for the price of hundreds of dollars a pair. So it was really, frankly, I think, as a mom, as someone who's worried about the safety of your air and water, the fact that he was that corrupt in his personal dealings was one thing. The fact that he was playing that fast and loose with the water that we all drink and the air that we all breathe was what was truly scary about Scott Pruitt.
Talk a little bit more about what some of the impacts that he had were on clean air, clean water regulations. Talk a little bit more specifically about what some of his legacies will be moving on from the EPA.
Well, the long list of Scott Pruitt's ethical scandals is only matched by the long list of air and water and climate regulations that he tried to roll back in his tenure at EPA. Everything from standards for how to dispose of toxic coal ash safely so it doesn't end up in the drinking water, so you don't have things like arsenic in your drinking water from coal ash, to the first ever climate standards that we had as a nation to reduce climate pollution from power plants. He was working to repeal and revoke those. You talk about the safety of pesticides. You can talk about Scott Pruitt never met an environmental regulation that he didn't want to try to roll back or repeal. And the good news, if there is any, is that he didn't get too far in that agenda. A lot of what he was trying to do, we believe, was illegal, and the Sierra Club and other groups were challenging him in court every step of the way. So he set a lot of bad things in motion, and we are worried that Andrew Wheeler, the number 2 at the EPA, who's now in charge, will continue on that toxic agenda, but we also are very determined to fight them every step of the way.
Yeah, and so let's talk a little bit more about Andrew Wheeler. Again, he's a former coal lobbyist, and I understand that your organization actually obtained emails between him and Scott Pruitt through the Freedom of Information Act. What did you find from those emails, and what do you generally expect from him as an EPA administrator?
Well, I want to give a special shout out to our attorneys and press folks at the Sierra Club. They paged through, I am not kidding you, almost 60,000 pages of FOIA documents from the EPA that are the source of the information about a lot of these scandals that you saw on the news and you read about on the front pages of the newspaper. And Wheeler and Pruitt were definitely partners in crime working to advance this agenda of rolling back our environmental safeguards, that they're going to continue full speed ahead with Wheeler at the helm to try to get that agenda over the finish line. And we are going to be fighting at the Sierra Club and with all of our partners every step of the way to prevent that from happening. Because it really is, just as the mom who confronted Scott Pruitt in the restaurant put it so beautifully, it's our kids' future. It's the safety of the water we drink and the air that we breathe. And that is what they are playing fast and loose with to benefit their polluter buddies.
And then lastly, how can people hold the EPA administrator, whether it's Pruitt, Wheeler, or somebody else, accountable? What are some actions that people can take to ensure that we don't have another EPA administrator like Scott Pruitt? Is that even possible?
Well, the Sierra Club tonight is reaching out to all of our members and supporters and asking them to call their members of Congress, because Congress is the agency that does have oversight over the EPA when obviously Trump is happy to have folks running the EPA doing the bidding of polluters. And so our check on that is the Congress. And Scott Pruitt did get a lot of very hard questions, increasingly hard questions every time he appeared before the Congress and before the Senate. That was a lot of what put him on the hot seat and again exposed some of this corruption. And so we're going to be counting on members of Congress now to do the same thing with Wheeler, who again, he's a coal lobbyist. He has a very long and not very pretty track record when it comes to clean air, clean water. He's got the same agenda as Pruitt and Trump, which is to dismantle all of our environmental safeguards. And so folks should call their members of Congress and ask them to oppose Wheeler and Trump's agenda and to actually put someone in charge of EPA who will let the EPA do its job and fulfill its mission. I'm sure the very hardworking folks at EPA are breathing a sigh of relief tonight and would just like to be able to do their jobs to make sure our air and water are safe, and the Congress needs to allow the EPA to do just that. That's what the American people are counting on.
All right, well, Marianne, as we see what Wheeler and others do in the EPA, we'll be sure to check in again with you. Thanks so much for coming on today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
And thank you for joining us on the Real News Network.